Hello and welcome. I am your host, JP John Poz, and with me, of course, is the former WCW and ECW World Tag Team Champion, one of the greatest minds and bookers ever in the history of the business, the Games Master, the Taskmaster, the Devil himself, Mr. Kevin Sullivan. Kevin, how you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great, JP. How are you?
Not too bad. Can't complain. What do you think about the latest developments in the WWE as far as the bloodline is kicking ass? The Rock is now acknowledging Roman Reigns as his tribal chief.
Just when you think it's over, they pull you back in, right?
Yep.
I mean, that was a brilliant interview especially when he grabbed his hand and Paulie's facials. I mean, do you know the exact length of time this has been running?
The bloodline storyline or that segment?
Yeah. Bloodline storyline.
Over 3 years.
And it's gotten hotter.
Yep.
I mean, this is phenomenal. I mean, they've caught you like I don't think any other thing in the history of wrestling has caught you this long and this intense. And they got you allowing yourself to be bought into 21-minute promo and loving it. Right?
Yep.
Uh, and it's got you saying what comes next. And here's the funny thing. Usually isn't the WrestleMania card booked already?
Pretty much. Usually, yeah.
We still don't really know, do we?
We're assuming that it's definitely going to be Rock and Roman versus Seth and
Right.
Cody, but it's not set in stone for night one yet. They haven't said yet if it's set in stone and if it's going to happen.
Right. And we don't know what night that Cody and I was
Roman.
thinking, yeah, Roman, but where does that I just stumbled there because I was thinking if it's Cody and Roman, where does that leave Rock for the other night?
Right. I don't know. Interesting.
Yeah.
You
Because
would think you need him wrestling, you would think.
yeah, you think you need him there for something, and especially with this new takeover. And I don't think people have made a big enough deal about Vince on those stocks.
Yeah, right. That was a lot of stuff. Basically, over time, it's been $1 billion worth of stock that he sold.
Yeah, but this last one, right?
Yep.
He sold 25%. He kept 25%. I'm not sure, but
No, I think he only has 9% left, I think.
okay, yeah. So, what does that look like? You know what I always talk to you about the business side of wrestling.
Yep.
What does this look like when a guy who owned what 51% of the stocks at one time
Oh, yeah.
only owns 9% that bails out? What does that say to the marketplace, the stock marketplace? Does he know something?
Yeah,
Right?
that's what I'm wondering. Does he know something that we don't is about to go down or something? It's very
Or is
weird.
it or is it just a manipulation on his part to hurt their business?
Could be. Never know. Could be for
Yeah.
sure. It's just interesting that he's out and he's nowhere around, but then he's selling all the stock. He's making all this money off of them. Crazy. They had to give him, I forget what it was, some other sort of dividend check as well, which was like $111 million, something crazy. So all in total, it was like 1,100,100,011, something crazy. It was like 11111000000. It was an insane amount of money.
So that's why I think that this hasn't been talked about enough. To me, if a head of a company that owned 51% of the stocks, we'll say it was Elon Musk, right? And Tesla or whatever branch of the company went from 51% of to 9%. Wouldn't that send rumblings in the marketplace?
Yeah, you would think big time. Yep.
Yeah, so that's why I stumbled there for a second about The Rock. They got to make this the most successful one of all times.
I think that's why he's
So
involved. Yep.
that's why he's involved, but I think that's why they're taking their time before we know exactly. This is presented to me that they're taking their time and they're through, sifting through the sands to get everything perfect because they need to make a statement on this one. They got to shift the momentum off of Vince right now.
It's crazy. The Rock, man, he gets the $30 million equity stake in TKO, but he also gets all of his trademarks too. He owns The Rock, he owns this, he owns that. He's a board member. I mean, he's kind of, the boss over there, if you will. He kind of do whatever he wants. Vince is out. He stepped right in.
Yeah, pretty amazing. I thought Hunter has done an incredible job, right? I think he's done an incredible job, but where does that leave him in the pecking order now that The Rock is on the board?
Yeah, definitely a peg lower than he used to be. That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And uh, how does he? Uh, where am I going with this? Is how does he feel after putting in all this time, right? All these years that The Rock sweeps in, they give him that chunk load of money,
Yep.
put him on the board. Would you feel confident in your position then?
No, it almost seems like a little bit of a takeover with The Rock for sure, which could then mean maybe he wants to be taking over creative. You never know.
Yeah, and where I'm going with this is I don't think they need Hunter to be upset and not producing the way he has. He doesn't need any distractions, and it doesn't look like he is being distracted. But I think Hunter needs to be propped up for the job he's done.
Yep. Totally agree. He's been doing pretty damn good job as a booker there. Obviously, getting him in a pretty good position. The ratings are pretty strong right now, so kind of can't discount what he's done to get him to this point.
Right, right.
What do you think of Paul Heyman in the WWE Hall of Fame, which was just announced?
I think I go back to the first night I met him and broke him into the business. Got a promo with him. I gave him the phone. Yeah, I knew Paul. I mean, I worked for Paul. He worked for me. When he had ECW, you know, I don't think anybody realizes how much he got out of so little. I mean, he had those guys working for him like they were, it was a part of a professional team. Everybody there in the locker room looked for Paul for guidance. He did a hell of a job. We're still talking about it. I guarantee you, when he gets inducted, the whole audience is gonna chant ECW.
Yep,
And
definitely.
he is ECW has got bigger in the people's minds as every year goes by. They don't realize they weren't that successful outside of Philly. You think that's fair to say?
It depends on the market for sure, but yeah, not
What
not as kind of not as much as people think that they were successful for
right?
sure.
What other market would you say they did well in Chicago?
Yeah, usually Ohio, like Dayton area, would use pretty good. Sometimes Florida would draw well for them. Pittsburgh was a big one.
Was that because of Shane? You think?
Yes, for those few years, yes, big time.
Okay, okay. Where when in Florida did they draw? Where in Florida?
Like around Orlando, but really the Kissimmee area, you would probably say,
Okay,
which is not huge market to begin with. Yeah,
right, right. So I mean,
and maybe New York City a bit. You know, Manhattan Center, Elks Lodge, all
right.
those places. So Northeast.
But they were perceived now. If you asked a wrestling fan who maybe never even saw them, that they were bigger than life.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Crazy to think that, but that's great on Paul to get that perception. Again, building
Oh,
something so small into something that seems so much bigger.
yeah. I mean, he's did an incredible job. Uh, I'd be in the locker room, and it didn't matter who was there that night. Terry Funk, Tony Atlas, Morocco, the Sheik, Sabu. When he gave that talk and got those guys riled up, they would have done anything for Paul. Paul is a great, great motivator, and he's done an incredible job.
Newt Rockney, if you will.
Yeah, I don't know if we're giving Paul his proper props now with this bloodline story. I mean, he's a very intricate piece.
Yep.
Go back, we've kind of have a tendency to forget as time goes by, but it just hit me when we were talking. This goes back to Brock and Roman with the belt in the middle. Remember that?
Yes. Yep.
I mean, this has been going on for a long, long time. It's been to me the most successful angle I've ever seen by far.
Even over NWO.
Well, there was cracks by the third year in the NWO for sure.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
This for longevity. I mean, the original NWO, you know, which I always talk about the four of them: X-Pac, Kevin, Scott, and Hulk. They
Yep.
were as strong as they ever were, right? But the peripheral players at that time kind of weakened the NWO, and that's why I think they've done such a good job by not getting greedy and expanding the bloodline and put too many members in.
That's been the one smart thing that they've done is, just
Yeah,
Solo and the Usos and Roman and now The Rock, which makes perfect sense. They haven't gone crazy and put a million
right,
people. I mean, they had an awesome picture of all the bloodline people that could be in it, but they're not in it per se.
right. I mean, it was when we were passing out T-shirts, thinking that was going to elevate guys for having NWO T-shirt on, and I go back to Sammy. That elevated Sammy. That time when they had the match in Montreal. I mean, I don't think there was anybody hotter than Sammy at that moment in the business.
No, he was super hot at that. What do you think about Bull Nakano going into the Hall of Fame?
She deserved it. She was a trendsetter, right? Wouldn't you say she was ahead of her time?
Oh, big time, definitely.
Yeah.
Were you surprised to see in WWE Hall of Fame? Because sometimes they don't really acknowledge all the right people they should be acknowledging for the Hall of Fame.
Uh, I think it was also a strategic move. They have conquered the universe, right? But really, when's the last time they actually had a show in Japan? 25 years ago?
They've had house shows there. I don't know the last time they have, but nothing like major shows. It'll be like kind of a one off or a two off, and it's nothing major.
Recently?
I don't remember the last time, but maybe a couple years ago. Maybe I don't remember the last, but they did have it. Like Nakamura was on it and stuff, but it wasn't like a major house show. It was kind of like a one off or a tour.
Okay. So maybe they're also doing that to break into that market.
Definitely possible.
Yeah.
It is interesting though, like they kind of pick and choose for the Hall of Fame, but obviously Vince is not part of the production this year, obviously, or he's not picking the names this year. But just interesting that they pick Bull Nakano, deserving for sure. But it's just one of those things like, wow, interesting. They're like, I don't think Vince would ever pick their, you know what I mean?
Right. That's why I'm saying maybe it's done for strategic reason.
Yeah, you never know with WWE. They're pretty smart with stuff like that. I feel like Bray Wyatt maybe needs to go in this year too,
Yeah, for sure.
or is it too soon? Maybe for his family, you
No,
think, or no?
no, I think it would help family, right?
I would think, yeah. Just don't know if
Yeah.
emotionally if they're quite ready for that.
Well, it would be a positive thing for the family, that be recognized. I'm sure they need a little consoling.
Would you want the entire ECW to be a part of the Hall of Fame this year, like as
No,
a brand? Oh, why
no.
not?
I think it would separate, it would hurt Paul's importance. Paul is getting inducted into the Hall of Fame for all his hard work. Then you're going to induct the whole team. It just doesn't make sense to me. Okay, go back in baseball. The guy gets the MVP and goes to the Hall of Fame. Does the whole team go?
No. It's very interesting. A guy that worked in ECW sent me a text. We were going back and forth after Paul was announced for the Hall of Fame, and he said, oh, a bunch of the guys that were on the roster, and he said, would any of these guys been a star anywhere else? And it was like, pretty decent list, and a couple big names were on the list. And I said, honestly, no. So he said, that's all Paul. You got to give him the credit getting those guys over when they wouldn't have necessarily been over anywhere else.
And that's true. That's true.
Crazy what he was able to do with not to say that those guys weren't good, but they were almost castaways in certain aspects. Some of those guys that he got over.
He got the most out of the most anybody could have got out of the ability for guys on their way up, guys on the way down, and guys that would never have made it, like 911. Paul got him over with that choke slam,
Yep.
and the guy was over. Paul got a lot of people over. Paul had a unique knack, in my opinion, of seeing something in everybody that he could use and add to a storyline. Mike Whipwreck, Tommy Dreamer, right?
Yep.
Sandman. You can go up and down the list. I mean, Shane, who got his break there, showed that he could carry a company. I mean, he, Paul did a lot of good things.
No doubt about it. Congrats to him and Bull Nakano so far, the first two names mentioned for the WWE Hall of Fame. But of course, as we were talking about WCW land, we got to go back in history and the topic at hand today, WrestleWar 1991, which was February 24th. from Phoenix, Arizona, at the Arizona Veterans Memorial Coliseum. The attendance over 6,800, not too shabby there. The tagline, "We want you," and the pay-per-views buys were 160K. So not terrible there either for WrestleWar 91, which of course will feature a War Games match. What are your kind of memories of just 91 WCW? Because you're there, not really wrestling as much in 91, but you're there. You're kind of with Oz a little bit as with Kevin Nash. 91 seemed to be a little bit of influx, like Flair's on his way out. 91 felt like a weird year for WCW.
Yeah, it was too. I don't see, or I don't remember Kevin and I making a lot of house shows. And you brought it up before, he was Oz. I don't think he made many house shows as Oz, did he?
Not that many, no. And
So,
you guys really, it looks like one tag match losing to Brad Armstrong and Owen Hart in Columbia, South Carolina in March of 91. So not many for you and him at least.
yeah, and I don't think he had many. It was, like you said, it was a transitional year and it was really in flux. I mean, that's when Herd was in solid, right?
Yep.
That's when Rick and him were going toe to toe. There
Yep.
was a lot of unstableness in the company. And when the committee tried to put uh, put Herd's ideas, it was like pounding a square peg in a round hole. It just didn't work. You know what I mean? It was, and then it caused a lot of difficulties. There was a lot of infighting. It wasn't a good time. To me, it was probably one of the lowest times until they went out of business.
Yeah, 91 just felt like a weird year. I kind of liked it in a weird way, and as a fan, I liked it, but it definitely, looking back, it's like, man, a lot of weird stuff was going on. Maybe Hurd on his way out, Flair's on his way out. Uh, just strange.
What did you like about it?
I don't know why. When I was a kid, I was just a big Sting fan,
Okay.
so I just kind of like whatever he was doing. Like he's feuding with Nikita, he's feuding with Rude, he's feuding with Luger a little bit eventually. So I kind of like whatever Sting was doing. Abby and Cactus were interesting, but when you look back at it, it's like it's kind of a stranger. Like you bring in Stan Hansen randomly a few times, so interesting but weird year for sure.
Right, right. And when they brought Hanson in, I don't think they presented him the right way. He had all that licorice in his mouth running down his chest. I mean, would that be the way to present Stan Hansen, the ass kicker?
No,
It was like everything they did was like in a mirror, it was reversed than what it should have been, right?
yep, definitely.
Yeah.
And interesting here, the main event. So it's going to be War Games with Sting, Brian Pillman, and the Steiner Brothers against the Four Horsemen: Ric Flair, Barry Windham, Sid Vicious, and Arn Anderson is injured, so they have Larry Zbyszko as the replacement. He's not a member of the Horsemen, but he's just brought in as a replacement for Arn, who was injured at the time. Do you remember Arn being injured and out of this match?
Oh, yeah. That's when Arn had hurt his neck. It was getting progressively worse.
Hmm.
Yeah.
You like Zbyszko as the replacement,
Yeah, absolutely.
the cruncher, if you will.
Yeah, Larry was the perfect fit to replace Arn. You got to remember, they were tag team partners for a while, right?
Hmm.
He fit in with the Horsemen better than anybody else, I think, as an outside identity.
Yep.
I think he did a. I think they did a great justice to the Horsemen and to Arn too, because they got a very good worker to replace Arn, or at
What
least
did
stand for Arn.
Well, yeah, yep. What did you think of Sid Vicious as a part of the Horsemen?
I didn't really like Sid in that group. I like Sid by himself. It's no knock on Sid. I think Sid was extremely, extremely. If they could have kept him on track, or they could have kept themselves on track with Sid, Sid could have been one of the biggest draws of all times.
What do you think held him back?
I've heard the story. We've all heard the story about the softball, right?
Hmm.
Now, I never saw him play softball. I don't know if that's true, but if that was true, I mean, to put that above what he was given the talents to wrestle was a huge mistake on his part. And it also started it to draw down the hill. Do you know what I mean? That people would pick up, oh, where's Sid? Even if he was hurt, they'd say, oh, he's off playing softball. The perception.
Yep,
And it made people, I think, hesitant to give him the keys to the kingdom.
yep. Bad reputation to have.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, obviously, Flair, Barry, and Arn are awesome and typical Horsemen. But do you think Sid is like a typical Horseman, though? You think he really fit the
No,
group per se?
no, that's what I was saying. I didn't think he fit the group at all. I don't think he fit the group at all. He should have been off by himself.
Is that one of those things where they pick him to be a part of the group, or is WCW picking him to be a part of the Horsemen?
I think with the Horsemen, Rick and Arn had to say to who is a horseman most of the times.
Maybe not Paul Roma per se.
I was just
Maybe,
going to say, I wasn't going to say it, but that's what I was thinking too.
yeah, because it definitely seems like he wasn't a pick.
Yeah, Dusty put him in there.
Any particular reason why?
Probably because Paul looked good. He was a solid worker, but he just didn't fit in that group. I think it was because the all these guys that were horsemen except for Rick came from the South. Roma's accent, it just didn't fit.
Yeah, it's strange. Strange pairing. He looked good, looked like $1 million. Just didn't work
Oh,
with the
yeah,
group.
yeah.
Good worker too.
Very good, solid. That's what I said. Looked magnificent, but there
Yep.
was something there. It was like, you know, uh, in the hood, that he was not in the right gang. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep, yep. When you look at the Horseman too, you think that being the Horseman, doing the Horseman in '91 is a little passe because this is like the fifth incarnation of the group. It started 6 years ago. Do you think that, or 5 years ago, 6 years ago, whatever? Do you think that it still should have been a thing? Like, should the Horseman have still been going in 1991?
Well, it should have been reconstructed. They should have disbanded. They should have had a great storyline to disband, and then maybe he'll start picking off the former horsemen, you know, and jumpings, and where they finally have to come back together. You could have done something that way.
Yep. Now, as far as WrestleWar here, 91, we'll start off mentioning this dark match, which is a very interesting dark match here. It's only about a 7 minute, 30-second dark match, but it's Eddie Guerrero and Ultraman defeating Hoychol and Rudy Boy. Obviously, these are Mexican athletes. Um, did not air in the pay-per-view, of course, but interesting. Eddie Guerrero in '91 here. I know sporadically he would have some appearances, and obviously that match against Terry Funk, which was televised a few years earlier, is something that was amazing because he was really putting Eddie over and making him look good. But in '91 here, was there ever a thought of bringing Eddie in? I know obviously he comes in 4 years later, but was that ever a thought here?
I think it was bantered about. I mean, Eddie was a magnificent performer. Wasn't he working in Mexico at this time with Art Barr as the Los Gringos?
That would be a little bit later, but yeah, he would be a big part of that. Yep.
Was
Los
that the same
Gringos
time?
Locos.
Was that the,
Little. That it was a little bit later, I believe.
I'm wondering if he started to work Mexico then.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
What I'm saying, was he working Mexico when he was coming in doing shots for WCW?
In '91, yeah, a little bit here and there.
Okay, so maybe that.
Basically, basically, he was in CMLL, and then eventually, I think '92 ish, heads to AAA, and then a little bit after that, he starts teaming up with Art Barr.
Okay, so maybe that's why they didn't uh, go after him as hardly as they should have.
Maybe not as polished either in the early '90s as he would eventually become.
Well, of course, he wasn't as polished, but he was great. I mean, he's a Guerrero. I mean, they know how to work. He could work. You know, they were wrestling in their backyard. There was a ring in their backyard in El Paso. He was a phenomenal performer, and at the end, he became one of the greatest performers of all times.
No doubt.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So it's interesting to think like when you look at some of these old results and stuff like, wow, Eddie Guerrero popping up in dark matches. Obviously, if you weren't in the arena, you probably didn't see it, but it's just interesting to go back and look and see, wow, he had several appearances for WCW while he was still on CMLL.
Right, right.
So
And
sorry,
I, I think we're trying to. Some of us saw the advantage of having a relationship with a company in Mexico.
absolutely smart. Seems like AEW right now is going to CMLL and away from AAA, which means obviously you can't have those guys on the same card at the same time. So I don't know if that's smart or I don't know. Maybe it is having the CMLL relationship rather than the AAA relationship. I don't know. I would think you'd rather have the AAA, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the plan is. You'd have to know what the plan is and why they chose that.
I know New Japan Pro Wrestling has a relationship with CMLL, and I don't know if that has anything to do with it because obviously AEW has a relationship with New Japan. So I'm not 100% sure all the inner workings of why, but I noticed that all the AAA wrestlers are kind of pushed to the side a little bit here by AEW, even though they were a mainstay for a while, and now CMLL is all over AEW TV.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they're trying to, you know, the forbidden door, they've opened it up. And obviously they're trying to connect the dots with all three of them, right?
Yep.
If New Japan and AEW, well, would you go with AAA? I don't think so. If you and the New Japan don't have a working relationship, right?
Right.
So
So, as far as the show, the pay per view kicks off, interestingly enough, with a 6-man tag match for the WCW World 6-Man Championships, which didn't really last that long and really kind of a strange gimmick anyway. Do you think that in 1991 they needed a 6-man title? I mean, it was basically around from February to December, the championships, and it was held by basically 4 teams. So, do you think it's necessarily you needed a 6-man title in 1991?
wasn't that for Dusty and the Road Warriors?
This would be the new version. So
Okay.
they disappeared for a while, and then in '91 they popped back up. But originally, yes, you're right. Originally, back in
Yeah,
the '88 ish era, yep.
yeah. I didn't. I mean, I'm not a fan of that trio champion. Just I don't know.
It's just
Just
weird
doesn't.
because it just
Sorry.
seems like there's not enough talent on the roster to have like six-man titles, you know?
Right. Right.
And it's not like you had all these factions either that needed to have or necessitated a six-man championship either. Basically, so Junkyard Dog, Ricky Morton, and Tommy Rich win the new six-man championship match at a house show versus Buddy Lindell, Dutch Mantel, and Dr. X, which was Moondog Rex under a hood. So it's nothing like there was this big faction warfare and you needed six-man tags.
Right. Right. I mean, well, it was one of those things that we look back now and we know the mistake. You know, it was they were trying to cram. Sometimes they were trying to make every match very important, and it doesn't separate the main event. If there's 5 championship matches on the card, do you think?
Yep.
So, mistake having a trio championship, I believe.
So Ricky Morton, Tommy Rich, and Junkyard Dog defended the titles and defeated Big Cat and the State Patrol, which was Lieutenant James Earl Wright and Sergeant Buddy Lee Parker. The match actually went almost 10 minutes. So 10-minute opening tag. And it really not that bad of a match if you go back and watch. It's actually a pretty good match. Just weird. It's like, wow, they really need a six-man title. This match is almost like a Saturday night match, not a pay-per-view match to me.
Right, right. And that's what was going on this time. That's why I asked you, how did you like 91? To me, it was just turmoil that
A lot of
nothing made
influx. Yeah.
sense. Nothing made sense.
Yep.
So, uh, go ahead.
So basically, like what's going on here in 91 is I don't know, like trying stuff out, maybe? Is that what it is? Like throw it at the wall, see if it works?
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember how much pressure Jim Herd was pushing on that committee because he was coming up with those goofy ideas, you know what I mean? And it was like, do you remember the time he wanted to get rid of uh, the Midnight Express and the
Yes.
booking committee overruled him? I think because of that, there was a severe split and was built up to coming that was us against them. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So it was a very difficult time.
So after that match, Alexandra York, of course, Terry Reynolds, but Alexandra York of the York Foundation comes out. She has her computer with her, and she says, "My computer predicts matches." And her man, Terrence Taylor, aka Terry Taylor, would win his match before the 15-minute mark had elapsed on his match later on against Z-Man. So, an interesting little thing, and almost a little tease at AI here, right? I mean, talk about artificial intelligence. She had it
Well,
before anybody.
yeah, but I think that's to think that we were thinking about AI back
Yeah, no
then.
way. Yeah, no way.
There was no way.
Do you like that, or is that a little hokey? She's got the computer and she's got the glasses and she's saying how smart she is and she's gonna predict matches and stuff like that. Corny, no?
Well, it's hokey now. Back then, it was, the business was in a transition. That, like you said, the flux. They didn't know what they wanted. They didn't know. Everybody had a job, right? There was a repo man, a plumber,
Yep.
whatever, right? Then we had firemanship and the lumberjack and all that, right? It just was a different time and a different era. It was like they were trying to throw everything against the wall and see what stuck.
So basically, the York Foundation is going to be able to predict matches and obviously draw a lot of heat because the crowd is not particularly happy with that kind of stuff. Like, hey, we're predicting we're going to win. The computer says so. Crowd wasn't necessarily on their side. They definitely were hated.
Yeah, but I also think that if you could find out what the who was going to win, and you hadn't had the match yet, right? Wouldn't
Right.
you attack the baby faces?
Right. Yeah. Yep.
So I mean, you got to go along with some stuff because it's just wrestling.
Yes, yes. So the next match is basically, to me, a dream match of the probably the two most underrated wrestlers of all time, two of the greatest workers of all time. Bobby Eaton defeats Brad Armstrong in 13 minutes in a really good match. So I love that that's just kind of thrown on the pay-per-view, maybe just for those people that love wrestling. But looking back, awesome match, and it's awesome to have those two on the pay-per-view wrestling each other.
Two of the smoothest guys I was ever in the ring with. I wrestled Brad a lot in different territories, especially in the Pensacola one, where I had an angle with the whole family. Brad was so smooth. I mean, he reminded me a lot of Barry Windham, how smooth he was. Those two guys were probably the smoothest guys I've ever seen, besides Steamboat. You know what I mean?
Yep,
They almost made it look too easy.
I agree. So smooth.
Yeah.
But that's awesome that's on there. I mean, that's just like random as hell, and there's no real storyline to it. But it's just these two guys having a good match. I know people get on that for AEW, but sometimes it's a good thing.
And what do you, yeah, sometimes it is. It gives the people like, whoa, I didn't expect that to be that good. But
Right.
I mean, and the other thing is, what do you say about Bobby Eaton? One of the greatest performers of all times. Two,
Absolutely.
you said it right. Two of the most underrated guys in the history of the business.
They rule. Those guys are awesome. Now the next match is weird. It's a Japanese women's match. It's a Joshi match, if you will. This is kind of strange as well. Itsuki Yamazaki and Mami Katamura defeated Miki Honda and Miss A via pinfall. The match went about 7 minutes. Um, I mean, I'm not really into the Japanese women's wrestling stuff, but I guess for the most part, though, this match was kind of given a good review and people did like it. But was there supposed to be some sort of all Japan women's relationship with you guys in '91? Why this random women's all Japan tag match?
I'm going out on a limb here. I think it was because it had been kicked around to have a women's division that had a lot of wrestling in it. And a relationship with New Japan's Women Wrestling Company would have been the easiest way to have that done.
Do you think
Again,
do you think it was
again,
popular though here? That's like Joshi.
no, no, absolutely not. But again, it's what we said before. It's 91. They're throwing everything against the wall and to see
Yep.
what sticks.
It is interesting here in 2024 that that's kind of been somewhat popular. Like there was a promotion here, Sakuban, that was in New York having shows that was just Japanese Joshi shows. So it does seem like there's a audience for it nowadays.
I think there's a cult following and everything right now with wrestling. You know, these death match companies,
Yeah.
the
Yep.
all girls company, you know, our friend Craig Massey has a company that's all women company, you know, and they got Rampage Jackson as their commissioner.
Yeah. Yep.
So there's a lot to choose from. It's a buffet right now.
For sure. That is for sure. Next up, another pretty good match. A nice little dream match. A lot shorter, though. Dustin Rhodes defeated Buddy Landell in 6 minutes and 30 seconds here. Another match, not necessarily pay per view worthy, just because there's really no storyline going on with it or anything, but two very good hands right there. Dustin Rhodes and Buddy Landell, the Nature Boy.
Yeah, they should have definitely had a program before going into this. Uh, as years have gone by, I've appreciated Buddy Landell's work a lot more than I did at the time. It was like back then I was saying, I wonder if a lot of people were saying, well, he's just being Flair. No, he wasn't. He was being the reverse of Flair. And, Buddy came close a bunch of times of really busting through. And different things held him back, different situations. But Buddy and Dustin would have been a terrific match. And it was solid, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But it would have been
Yep.
a terrific if there was a storyline behind it. Because Dustin can work his ass off.
And it's funny, it's like a lot of these matches are kind of just thrown together. There's no real storyline in them. But for the most part, you got some like good matches. Like Dustin and Buddy was good. Bob Eaton and Brad Armstrong was good. Even the 6-man opener was good. It's like in ring on fire. Creatively, not so much.
Yeah, and I think what you said was at the beginning of the podcast, this was almost like a Saturday night show.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, we're asking people to pay, what was it, 39.99 at the time, or
Yeah. Back then it's about $30. Eventually it would go up about $5 every few months. But yeah. Yep.
yeah. So it was like, I forget if it was Jimmy Cornette who said this. I was listening to YouTube, right? Uh, where he said, it might have been Conrad. I think it was Conrad that said this, that when the people were trading tapes, did I tell you this? People trading tapes, they were seeing great matches. They were
Yep.
all trading tapes to see great matches. They didn't care about the storylines because they weren't vested into going to the show, but they loved the great matches. Well, we've talked about some of the great matches now and legendary guys in the wrestling business and legendary workers that it didn't matter how great the match was, it didn't move the needle, right? But especially the Bobby and Brad.
Yep. Yep.
It was just a great match, but it didn't mean anything. It wasn't certainly the reaction of when the Roman grabbed the Rock's wrist and said, "Acknowledge me."
Right. Yep. Which was great, by
So,
the way. Yes.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
So interesting. They go behind the scenes, and Missy Hyatt attempts to interview Stan Hansen backstage. And instead of doing that, he kind of chases her off, and she runs away scared. And he's kind of doing that, like, they got the cowboy, got the dip dripping from his mouth, that she runs away, which I guess was a make fun because there was an announcer, Lisa Olson, in the Patriots locker room in 1990
yeah,
earlier, a few months earlier. So kind of cheesy, but I guess you guys were copying that in a way.
yeah. I remember that now that you said it. She was the first woman to go into a locker room in the NFL.
Right. Yep.
And they ran her out, right?
Yes.
So I guess we were trying to copy it. Pretty sophomoric.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was a
Yeah.
big Missy Hyatt fan back then, though. Was a big fan. I don't know about you, but I was definitely a big fan.
Uh, yeah.
So then we have the Young Pistols, which of course is Steve Armstrong and Tracy Smothers, defeating the royal family of Rip Morgan and Jack Victory. The match went about 12 minutes. This was just maybe I guess you could say, quote unquote, maybe the worst match of the night, even though it really wasn't that bad, but just nothing great here as far as this match. Just, it is what it is. Wasn't bad at all, but it wasn't great, especially compared to kind of what else is on the card.
Yeah. And no story, right? There
Nope,
was no
none.
story. And
Nope.
so your forecast gets to be clearer and clearer. It looks like a Saturday night. And we're asking people to pay $30.
Yep. Do you like the Young Pistols better, or do you like them known as the Wild Eyed Southern Boys with
Well,
the Southern flag, if you will, attached to it?
well, you can't have the Southern flag, you go nationwide and uh, that boxed you in and made you really regional with the Confederate flag, and it was just. I understand the bullshit about their heritage, but they did break away and did with all the crazy shit that Vince did in this era. Did he have a Confederate flag on anybody?
Right.
So that's why we call them the uh, Young
Young Pistol.
Pistols.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
then we have the next matchup. Let's see if Alexander York is right. Her man, Terrence Taylor, of course, with Alexander York, defeated the Z Man by pinfall in 11 minutes. Pretty good match here. Obviously, Terry Taylor, if you will, excellent hand. Z Man with the right opponent he could be good at times. Did you almost expect more out of the Z Man, like a bigger future, or no?
yeah. Yeah. I
Like
mean,
he was supposed to be him and Pillman were supposed to be the next things, and Pillman kind of just basically surpassed him and never looked back.
he was a really good athlete, Tom Zink, but there was some kind of touch of paranoia with him. You know, he was in a great spot in the tag match with Ricky Martel, right?
Yep,
Then he walked out because he found this discrepancy in the pay. Is that correct? What you heard?
that's what I heard. Yeah, yep,
Okay. Ricky Martel had been around the world, had booked in different places, had been the AWA champion. And if they were paying him more, it was not because they were trying to browbeat Zink. It was because they understood what Ricky Martel's influence was in that team and carried the team and was teaching Zink.
yep.
He was making good money. But what I'm getting at is he always had that bit of paranoia and he had a sarcastic attitude.
Definitely. So next up, for some reason, I obviously making fun of Elegante, but Paul Heyman is dressed up like a matador, and he's interviewing Elegante, kind of teasing him, goading him, and then of course Elegante then body slams him, and that's the end of that segment. But this is obviously when Heyman was kind of just an announcer and a backstage announcer and a commentator. So he didn't have a huge role in 91 like he was going to have at the end of 91 and into 92. But do you like that? Do you think that's, I don't know, a way to get Elegante over because he can't really work or wrestle is have him beat up, a heel announcer, if you will?
Again, I go back to we're throwing things against the wall. And we knew that wasn't going to work. What purpose was that? The Giants slamming Paul? You know, it
Yeah,
just,
kind of corny.
yeah, it was like, this is probably the era where this was desperation. We didn't know what we were doing.
Next up, we have an awesome match, especially on paper, but it's just not long enough. But of course, they would have better matches in Japan. But it's Big Van Vader versus Stan Hansen, ends in a double disqualification, only goes about 6 minutes and 30 seconds. I wish it was longer, but it wasn't. Awesome to have these two kind of go at it. Why the shorter match, non finish? Is this something because basically Japan wants to keep these guys both nice and clean?
Well, one was New Japan, the other one was All Japan, right?
Oh, that could be, you're right. That
Yeah,
could be a
yeah,
play role
that's
in as
what it
well. Yep.
was.
Yep.
That's what it was. Vader, New Japan,
Yes. Yep.
Hanson, All Japan.
Makes
They
sense.
had
Yep.
he had just knocked Vader's eye out, right?
Yep.
Earlier.
Yep.
So there shows you how willing they were to go and protect their own companies.
I thought this was cool though. Even back then, it's like, wow, these two beasts. Who the hell's going to win? You know what I mean? Like these two animals going at it, pretty evenly matched.
Yeah, and I think that the idea was to only give them 6 minutes was let's make sure they don't have enough time that something turns sideways. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
You don't need Vader to get his eye knocked out again.
Right. They definitely were two of the best. Like you could say big men, if you will. But I mean, the two of the best even at that time was great. I just wish the match was longer because it was awesome for what it was. The 6 minutes that it was awesome.
Yeah, but what I'm getting at is the business behind the business.
Yes. Yep.
If we gave them 15 minutes and somewhere after the 6 minute mark, someone got hurt and we're trying to placate both companies,
Yep.
they would have said, why did you let them go more than 6 or 7 minutes?
Yep. True. Next up, we have Lex Luger defending his United States Championship against Dan Spivey. Lex Luger defeated Spivey in 13 minutes to retain the title. Surprisingly, maybe to some, but a very good match between Luger and Spivey. What happens afterwards, maybe the best part. Nikita Koloff, who's supposedly retired at this point, comes out with Grizzly Smith, and they're handing a new United States Championship, a new belt for Luger, only to have Nikita nail Luger from behind and basically unretire and turn heel and beat up Luger and beat him up with the new belt. Good aftermath.
Yeah. Now, Nikita has a crew cut, right?
He's bald again.
Okay.
He did have a crew cut when he
Yeah.
left originally, though. Yes, I
Yeah.
know what you mean. Yep.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, Nikita had been a big draw for the Crockett's. Why not bring him in again? They're trying anything to get some traction.
Yep. And it felt like maybe a bit of revenge from Nikita, just playing off the old storyline where basically, if you look at it, Luger's a heel in '87. He beat Nikita for the U.S. title. Nikita had the longest title run up to the point, basically 330 days as champion. Luger defeats him, so it's kind of a cool little homage or a little throwback if you think about it, because he's attacking him, he's giving him the new belt. Well, why is he doing that? Because he beat him years earlier, saying that he should have never lost to him to begin with. So it does make sense storyline wise, even going back a few years.
Yeah, yeah, it does make sense. That was,
Nikita was bitter. Yep.
yeah, and that was one of the few things that had a bit of a storyline up until now.
Yep. Next up, we have the Fabulous Freebirds, Michael Hayes and Jimmy Jam Garvin, with Big Daddy Dink and Diamond Dallas Page defeating Doom, who of course is Ron Simmons and Butch Reed, with Teddy Long. And that was actually a tag match for the WCW Tag Team Championship. What do you think about the Fabulous Freebirds going over Doom?
Uh, One of the greatest ensemble casts of all times. I mean, Michael was the talker, the flamboyant one. Buddy was very instrumental in that group. He was the guy that's put in the time and got bounced around. And then you had Terry Gordy, the enforcer type guy, the bull of the woods. It was well constructed. And they all were pieced together so well that you could interchange them and not lose a step.
Here you have Jimmy Jam Garvin. Do you like Jimmy Jam in the Freebirds with Big Daddy Dink and DDP?
Yeah, I did like Jimmy in there. This is when Terry was going to Japan, right?
And he's gone, so there is no more really Gordy, and they're
Right.
not. You know, he's Japan all the way through.
Right. And then later on, he came back for a while, made shots with Dr. Death, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So, yeah, Jimmy was the perfect guy to fill in.
So Do you like so this is the interesting thing here. Do you like the fact that they win the tag team titles here, meaning the Freebirds win, they beat Doom, they're the new tag team champions. But technically speaking, the week before they lost these titles to the Steiner brothers at a TV taping, which would be aired after this. Does that confuse you as a booker? It's like, okay, we're gonna pretend they're champions here, they're gonna lose to the Steiner brothers, but this won't air until after the pay-per-view. A lot of things could happen, injuries and different stuff. It's kind of risky.
Yeah, it's risky, but it's been done since probably TV's been in vogue. Since it's been able to tape and show it back that it didn't wasn't live. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
So do you like it? No, but there are things that force you to do it. I never liked it because you're exposing it. You know, and with Janetti and Shawn Michaels, that happened, and then something happened where they couldn't show that they're winning the title. They never actually won the title, right?
Mm. Well, here on the pay-per-view, but they never really wanted to lose it. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
it was the same situation, but then one of them got hurt, I believe.
Right.
Yeah,
Yep. Yeah, it's just interesting. It's like, wow, Freebirds are the champs, but technically speaking, they're the champs for negative 1 week. You know what I mean? Because they
yeah,
already lost it a week ago. Yeah.
yeah,
That match was pretty good for what it was. Again, another short match, only went about 7 minutes, and obviously, Big Daddy Dink and DDP there are getting involved. DDP would be destined not to be a manager, as we've talked about on this show many, many times.
yeah. And I don't ever hear, I shouldn't say ever, but it's very rare in this day and age I hear anything about Humperdinck.
Yeah, right. But you should.
Yeah, he was very, very good being a manager.
Yep.
Very strange look, you know what I mean? Could get heat too.
Yep.
He could get heat. He was very, very good. Very. He went up to New York and was doing well, and something happened there, and then he just stepped out of the business and never went back.
Right. Big Daddy Dink. Weird name, but but kind of funny looking at it. Now, as far as the main event of the evening, the Four Horsemen, Ric Flair, Barry Windham, Sid Vicious, and the replacing Arn Anderson was, of course, the Cruncher, Larry Zbyszko, defeated Sting, Brian Pillman, and the Steiner brothers, Rick and Scott, in 22 minutes in an awesome, awesome War Games match. If you haven't seen it, go out of your way to see it. It is an awesome match, a 5-star match, if you will. The finish came when it seemed like Sid legitimately hits Pillman's head on the top of the cage with the power bomb, and then just destroys him with the power bomb. Looked like he may have hurt his neck pretty bad on that finish. Unable to continue, Elegante comes to the ring and he surrenders on Brian Pillman's behalf. So, first of all, what did you think about the match? And second of all, was that the original finish?
I believe it was. I mean, I'm pretty sure it was. I thought the match was excellent, and I don't think they would have sent Elegante down if someone was really hurt. You know what I mean?
Mm. He did kill him with that power bomb for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, knocked the wind out of him for sure.
Do you think that the Horsemen were definitely always supposed to win the match no matter what? That was the booking?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Great match. I mean, if people haven't seen it, you probably should. War Games is usually a home run match. It's usually an awesome match, but this was great. You had 8 pretty damn good workers here. You had a lot of action, just killing each other. It just felt like there was some real animosity, obviously, with Sting and the Horsemen. So really good stuff. And this was almost the only match that really kind of screamed pay-per-view, if you will, besides Vader and Hanson. But this screamed like why you should order the pay-per-view. It's almost on paper like a one-match show, even though all the other matches turned out to be pretty good. Right? Doesn't it feel a little bit like a one-man show when you're looking at the pay-per-view on paper?
Well, you started the show today by saying it was a Saturday night
Yeah.
show. It was. Yeah, you're absolutely right. With the 2 matches you picked out, that was the only ones that had any kind of a storyline with it.
and any sort of like marquee thing. I mean, obviously the War Games was what they were promoting, and that's the whole pay
Right.
per view. But it didn't seem like the rest of the pay per view had many storylines.
It didn't support the main event. The undercard did not support the main event. It wasn't because of the talent. It was because of creativity, the creative office
Yeah.
not giving enough time and storylines to the rest of the matches.
Yep. And believe it or not, this pay per view got basically rave reviews. Like I mentioned, all the matches were really good. This pay per view got rave reviews from the people watching it, critics alike. They just absolutely loved it, just for the fact that every match was good, and you had an awesome main event with War Games. So did get rave reviews, even though creative stunk for it.
Well, again, they were looking at good matches, right?
Yes, 100%.
Well, so that maybe solidifies my point where people, uh, the hardcore fan are buying it because they're seeing good matches, where the common wrestling fan doesn't see any storyline in it. There's no Roman Reigns grabbing the Rock's wrist and saying, "Acknowledge me."
Yes. Yep. Another interesting note, though, not that Phoenix is a bad market. I mean, it's a pretty good market, but WWF tried to run a show the day before you guys did in the same market. It drew 48,000 fans. But basically, they said between 48 and 6,000. So somewhere in between there is what the draw was. You guys drew 6,800 and basically had around the same gate as far as money concerns were, and buys wise as far as buying tickets. But it seemed like they were trying to hurt you guys by running that market the day before, but it didn't hurt at all.
Uh, yeah, it was one of those deals where how often had we been in the Phoenix market?
Not much. That's like WWF territory. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I'm getting at is I think we're brand new and people coming out to check us out.
Yep. And hey, kind of not that they had a big show. There was a house show, but you guys outdrew WWF in '91, so not too shabby.
No, no.
And this show, if you look at like critics, what critics say, they love this show. And the only shows they really liked more were Clash of Champions 9, which is Flair Funk and the I Quit match, and WrestleWar 89, which is Flair Steamboat. So the critics that love their wrestling, if you will, they
Right.
loved this show, WrestleWar 91. So I don't know, I give it a thumbs up just because I just loved the War Games so much, and the other matches were good. And you sold me with Vader and Hanson and Eaton and Brad Armstrong.
Yeah, yeah. I give it a thumbs up also. It was a good pay-per-view to build off of. It wasn't a disaster uh mechanically, which was a plus. You could have
Yep.
should have been able to build off of that.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Let's hit the plugs. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Two Man Power Trip. Kevin, what do you got going on in this crazy world?
This Saturday I'll be in Chillicothe, Ohio, for the uh, Tommy and his son Fulton.
Yep.
Uh, it's going to be a big, huge show, a convention, and then the wrestling afterwards. I'm going to be there for signing, and I'm also involved with Gangrel. So come out and see me.
Nice. All right. Thank you, everybody out there, for listening. See you right back here next time. Have a good one, folks.